The Trump administration is facing intensifying internal friction as competing priorities clash at the highest levels of government. At the center of this turbulence is a reported confrontation between Elon Musk, who leads the Department of Government Efficiency, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio during a cabinet-level meeting in March 2026.
Hello to President Trump. The US economy shrank in his first 3 months in office. American gross domestic product, a measure of all the goods and services in the economy, dropped by 0.3% from January to March.
You probably saw some numbers today. And I have to start off by saying that's Biden. That's not Trump, because we came in on January, this are quarterly numbers. And we came in and I was very against everything that Biden was doing in terms of the economy, destroying our.
The incident highlights broader questions about governance structure, institutional authority, and the challenges of managing federal agencies during a period of significant national stress. Musk, a tech entrepreneur who holds no Senate-confirmed position, allegedly criticized Rubio's management of the State Department, suggesting that staffing reductions had not proceeded aggressively enough and that the department's payroll remained too large. The confrontation reportedly occurred in front of other senior officials, raising concerns about how internal disagreements are being handled within the administration's decision-making framework. The context for this exchange is particularly significant. Rubio, a former presidential candidate who now occupies one of the most consequential cabinet positions in American government, is simultaneously managing U.S. foreign policy during active military operations against Iran, while overseeing substantial restructuring at the State Department. The demands of wartime diplomacy require maintaining robust institutional capacity, including qualified personnel who can handle increased operational complexity. Musk's role through the Department of Government Efficiency involves identifying cost reduction opportunities across federal agencies.
Are close to finally signing a deal on mineral resources, possibly within the next 24 hours. It would see the two countries jointly develop Ukraine's mineral wealth. President Trump says it will be money back for all the aid that America has given Ukraine in its war with Russia.
To meet with US officials, and as you say, they're saying the deal could be done within 24 hours. There are reported to be some last-minute disagreements, so let's wait and see. But what this deal does is it basically gives America access to.
However, his authority is informal, deriving from his relationship with President Trump, rather than from constitutional or statutory appointment processes. This creates an ambiguous power dynamic in which an unelected advisor can challenge cabinet secretaries on operational decisions within their own departments. The reported exchange between Musk and Rubio illustrates a fundamental tension. Applying uniform cost-cutting metrics to agencies with distinct operational requirements may not account for the specialized knowledge needed to maintain effective government functions. The State Department's staffing needs during a military conflict differ substantially from peacetime baselines, requiring diplomatic expertise and administrative support that cannot be easily quantified through efficiency formulas alone. President Trump publicly defended Rubio following reports of the confrontation, stating that the Secretary of State was performing effectively. This intervention served to reassert formal hierarchical structures while simultaneously maintaining support for Musk's broader efficiency agenda. The result is a governance model in which cabinet secretaries retain their positions but may face ongoing challenges from an advisor whose informal authority creates persistent institutional uncertainty. A similar dynamic reportedly emerged involving Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy regarding staffing at the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA faces ongoing scrutiny over aviation safety, with concerns about whether current staffing levels adequately support air traffic management. Pressure to reduce personnel in this context creates obvious tension with safety oversight responsibilities, generating friction between operational requirements and cost reduction targets. These incidents suggest a systematic pattern rather than isolated personality conflicts. When broad efficiency mandates intersect with agencies carrying out complex, safety-critical, or diplomatically sensitive functions, the resulting tensions appear inherent to the governance model rather than attributable to individual disagreements. The question becomes whether the administration can develop mechanisms to reconcile these competing imperatives without repeated public confrontations among senior officials. The economic backdrop against which these internal disputes unfold adds additional complexity. Consumer confidence has declined significantly, reaching historically low levels. Gasoline prices have risen to over $4 per gallon in many areas, representing approximately a $1 increase from pre-conflict baselines. Inflation remains elevated, with overall consumer prices rising 3.3% annually and core inflation at 2.6%. These economic conditions create a challenging environment for any administration. Rising energy costs stemming from Middle East instability affect household budgets directly, particularly for working families with limited transportation alternatives. When combined with consumer goods price pressures and concerns about government service quality, these factors contribute to an economic climate in which public satisfaction with administrative performance understandably declines. The administration's economic approval rating has fallen to approximately 30% according to available polling data. For a governing party approaching midterm elections, such figures raise significant concerns about electoral prospects, particularly in competitive congressional districts where economic performance historically influences voter behavior. The combination of tangible financial pressures and visible institutional discord creates a political environment that typically disadvantages incumbent parties. The structural nature of current economic challenges deserves attention. Energy price increases largely reflect geopolitical developments related to the Iran conflict, including impacts on shipping routes through the Strait of Hormuz. These supply-side pressures operate independently of domestic policy choices, though administration decisions regarding trade and tariffs contribute additional inflationary elements. The resulting economic environment features simultaneous growth concerns and price pressures, a combination that constrains traditional policy responses. Consumer confidence indicators merit particular scrutiny because they function as leading predictors of economic behavior. When households lack confidence in future economic conditions, they typically reduce discretionary spending, delay major purchases, increase precautionary savings, and make employment decisions based on risk aversion rather than growth optimism. Aggregated across millions of households, these behavioral shifts can produce measurable reductions in economic activity, potentially transforming slowdown concerns into contractionary outcomes. The current confidence reading of 47.6 represents a historically weak level, signaling that American households perceive substantial economic risk. This perception exists alongside actual price increases that families experience directly at gas stations and retail stores. The disconnect between economic data as statistical abstractions and economic conditions as lived experiences creates a political challenge that communication strategies cannot easily address. The governance challenges facing the Trump administration extend beyond immediate cabinet dynamics to encompass long-term institutional capacity and electoral calculations. Understanding these broader implications requires examining how current administrative decisions may affect both government functionality and political outcomes in the approaching midterm cycle. The Department of Veterans Affairs illustrates the concrete human impact of large-scale workforce reductions. The agency reportedly faces cuts affecting approximately 72,000 positions. Staff who process disability claims, provide healthcare services, manage benefits administration, and maintain direct contact with veterans seeking assistance. These are not abstract personnel statistics, but individuals performing specific functions that veterans rely upon for earned benefits and medical care. Reducing VA staffing by such magnitude inevitably affects service delivery. Longer wait times for medical appointments, delayed benefits processing, and reduced responsiveness to veteran inquiries represent predictable consequences of substantial workforce contraction. These service degradations fall upon a population that the administration and the Republican Party have historically emphasized supporting, creating particular political sensitivity around implementation of efficiency mandates within this agency. The institutional damage extends beyond immediate service disruptions. Federal agencies develop expertise and operational knowledge through sustained investment in human capital. Diplomatic professionals at the State Department, safety specialists at the FAA, and healthcare providers at the VA accumulate skills and relationships that enable complex governmental functions. Rapid workforce reduction risks dissipating this institutional knowledge, creating capacity gaps that require years to rebuild, even if political will for restoration eventually materializes. This long-term perspective matters because administrative decisions made for short-term budgetary objectives can generate consequences persisting across multiple administrations. The current efficiency initiative, whatever its immediate fiscal impact, may produce reduced governmental effectiveness that future leadership must address through renewed investment and organizational reconstruction. The full cost-benefit calculation should account for these extended time horizons rather than focusing exclusively on current expenditure reductions. The political implications of current governance challenges become particularly acute as the November midterm elections approach. Presidential administrations historically face electoral headwinds during midterm cycles, with the party holding the White House typically losing congressional seats. These normal dynamics intensify when economic conditions generate widespread public dissatisfaction and when administrative performance appears chaotic or ineffective. The 30% economic approval figure carries specific significance for House Republicans seeking to maintain their majority. Competitive districts in suburban and exurban areas often feature electorates particularly responsive to economic conditions. These voters typically make decisions based on comparative assessments of their financial circumstances rather than through fixed partisan identification. When gasoline prices, inflation rates, and employment concerns create pervasive economic anxiety, incumbent parties face substantial vulnerability, regardless of other political achievements. The visible discord within the administration compounds these economic pressures. When cabinet-level officials publicly clash over fundamental operational questions, when agencies face simultaneous demands for cost reduction and mission maintenance, and when service quality visibly deteriorates, voters reasonably question whether administrative leadership can effectively manage governmental responsibilities. These perceptions of institutional dysfunction, combined with tangible economic hardship, create electoral environments particularly unfavorable to governing parties. The specific case of the Musk-Rubio confrontation exemplifies how internal governance challenges can become public symbols of administrative disarray. Foreign governments observing American leadership dysfunction may reasonably question the stability and reliability of diplomatic commitments. Allied nations depending upon consistent American engagement face uncertainty about who actually directs foreign policy. Military and intelligence professionals require clarity regarding command structures during active operations. The public nature of reported conflicts undermines the confidence that international partnerships require. Similarly, domestic constituencies observing FAA staffing disputes may reasonably worry about aviation safety oversight. Veterans experiencing VA service delays may reasonably question whether promised support will materialize. Citizens encountering degraded government services across multiple agencies may reasonably conclude that administrative restructuring has proceeded without adequate attention to operational consequences. These perceptions, once formed, resist correction through messaging alone. The fundamental challenge facing the administration involves the gap between campaign promises and governing realities. The commitment to efficient government resonated politically during electoral competition. Implementing that commitment while maintaining effective agency operations during wartime, economic stress, and international instability has proven substantially more complex than rhetorical formulations suggested. This gap between aspiration and implementation defines the current political moment. Closing this gap before November presents formidable obstacles. Energy prices depend significantly upon geopolitical developments beyond unilateral American control. Tariff structures represent core policy commitments that reversal would contradict explicit political positioning. Workforce reductions, once implemented, cannot be instantly reversed without acknowledging error and incurring associated political costs. The administration appears constrained by its own policy choices from rapid economic improvement. Historical patterns suggest that administrations facing similar economic and political conditions typically experience substantial midterm losses. The combination of stagflationary pressures, simultaneous inflation and growth concerns, with visible governance dysfunction and low presidential approval, creates conditions associated with significant congressional seat changes. Whether current circumstances produce historically typical outcomes, or whether unique factors alter these patterns, remains to be determined. What remains clear is that the administration's current trajectory features multiple reinforcing challenges rather than isolated difficulties. Economic conditions, institutional conflicts, service degradations, and polling indicators point in similar directions. The reported cabinet confrontation between Musk and Rubio represents one manifestation of broader governance tensions that, unresolved, will likely continue generating political and administrative consequences through the remainder of this congressional term and beyond. The voters who will ultimately assess this administration's performance are already experiencing the economic conditions that shape their political evaluations. Their judgments will reflect tangible realities: prices at gas stations, experiences with government services, perceptions of institutional competence, rather than rhetorical framing or partisan positioning. The months between now and November provide limited time for fundamental economic or administrative transformation, suggesting that current conditions will substantially define the electoral environment in which the administration and its congressional allies must compete.